The letter arrived on a Tuesday, which felt appropriate somehow. Tuesdays had always been the day when life made its quiet announcements. Margaret had told him she was pregnant on a Tuesday. She'd received her cancer diagnosis on a Tuesday. And she died on a Tuesday, 8 years ago this month, while he stood at a podium 3,000 miles away explaining to a room full of strangers why humanity should extend the hand of friendship to beings from beyond the stars. Dr. Nathan Hale held the envelope up to the afternoon light streaming through his cabin window. Outside, the New Mexico desert stretched endless and indifferent, the way it had for millions of years before humans arrived, and the way it would continue long after they were gone. He'd chosen this isolation deliberately. The cabin sat 40 miles from the nearest town, accessible only by a dirt road that turned to impassable mud whenever it rained, which wasn't often. Inside these walls, he could pretend the world had stopped in 2037, before the Valon arrived, before everything changed, before he'd lost the only person who'd ever truly known him. His hands shook as he broke the seal. Arthritis, the doctor had said during his last checkup. Just another reminder that at 67, his body was a house slowly collapsing room by room. Soon enough, the whole structure would come down. The letterhead read NASA/UN Integration Council. He recognized the logo, the intertwined orbits of Earth and some distant star system, humanity reaching out across the cosmic dark. 20 years ago, he'd helped design that logo. Back when he still believed in things like progress and understanding. Back when he thought his work mattered more than being present when your wife needed you most. Dr. Hale, the letter began, and he almost laughed at the formality, as if anyone called him that anymore. He was just Nathan now, or more often, nothing at all. The hermit in the desert. The man who'd given up. We are writing to invite your participation in the Essence Compatibility Study, a groundbreaking research initiative examining the potential for human integration with Valon biotechnology. Your expertise in xenobiology, combined with your unique physiological profile, makes you an ideal candidate for this program. He set the letter down and walked to the kitchen, poured himself 3 fingers of bourbon even though it wasn't yet 4 in the afternoon. The alcohol burned going down, familiar and honest in a way nothing else was anymore. Through the window, he could see the grave marker he'd placed on the hill behind the cabin. Not Margaret's actual grave. That was in a cemetery in Virginia, surrounded by strangers. But he'd needed somewhere to talk to her, somewhere that felt like she might actually hear him. The program requires a 6-month residential commitment at our integration habitat in Colorado. Participants will be paired with Valon partners for intensive compatibility testing. Compensation includes $500,000, comprehensive medical coverage for life, and the opportunity to contribute to a project that may define humanity's future among the stars. $500,000. He could leave that to Emily. His daughter, who hadn't spoken to him in more than words strung together out of obligation for 3 years. Emily, who'd looked at him across Margaret's hospital bed and said, "She asked for you, Dad. For 3 days she asked, where were you?" At a conference in Geneva, explaining why we shouldn't fear the Valon, why their refugee crisis was humanity's opportunity to prove we'd evolved beyond tribalism. He'd been so proud of that speech. He'd revised it 17 times on the flight over, polishing each phrase until it shone. Meanwhile, Margaret had died asking for him, and Emily had been the one holding her hand, bearing witness to the end, doing the job that should have been his. He picked up the letter again, read through the medical disclaimers and legal protections, the careful language that said without quite saying that this program might kill him. Previous trials had resulted in adverse reactions in approximately 8% of subjects. They were looking for older candidates now, the letter explained. Something about mature immune systems being less reactive, more accepting of foreign biological integration. In other words, they'd killed too many young people, and were now testing whether the old and dying made better guinea pigs. Nathan walked back to the window, bourbon in hand, and stared at the marker on the hill. He'd carved it himself from a piece of sandstone, her name and dates and nothing else. What else was there to say? Margaret Chen Hale, beloved wife and mother, lost while her husband chased immortality in the stars. That wouldn't fit on any headstone. The Valon had been here for 15 years now. He remembered watching the first ships descend, massive crystalline structures that caught the sunlight and threw it back in colors that didn't quite exist in Earth's spectrum. Refugees, they'd called themselves. Their sun had gone supernova, consuming their homeworld in a cosmic instant. 10,000 survivors out of billions, fleeing in generation ships that had limped across space for decades before finding Earth. First contact had been peaceful, briefly. Then the incident at Defense Station Meridian, where jumpy human commanders had fired on a Valon supply ship, and the Valon had responded with overwhelming force. 40,000 humans dead in the 17-hour war that followed. After that came the uneasy truce, the treaties, the integration protocols. The Valon were here to stay, whether humanity liked it or not. Nathan had been one of the voices arguing for acceptance, for cooperation. He'd published papers on Valon biology, their crystalline cellular structures, the way their consciousness seemed to operate on quantum frequencies humans were only beginning to understand. He'd testified before Congress, spoken at the UN, become the face of peaceful integration. And all of it, he now understood, had been running away. Running from the small, quiet space where Margaret needed him to be her husband, instead of humanity's ambassador to the stars. He looked at the letter again. 6 months in Colorado. 6 months of being useful, maybe. 6 months of not sitting in this cabin waiting to die. The phone rang, startling him. It rang so rarely that the sound felt like an intrusion from another world. He almost didn't answer, but some stubborn reflex made him pick up. Emily's voice came through, professional and distant. "Dad, I got a call from someone at NASA. They said they'd sent you a letter." He closed his eyes. So they'd contacted her too, making sure he couldn't refuse quietly, forcing a conversation he didn't want to have. "I got it today." "Are you going to do it?" No warmth in the question, just the tone she used in court, cross-examining witnesses. "I don't know." A lie. He'd already decided, somewhere in the space between reading the compensation amount and looking at Margaret's marker. "I'm thinking about it." $500,000, she said. "That's what they told me you'd be paid." She paused, and he could hear something shifting in her voice, some emotion trying to break through the professional armor. "They also told me there's a significant mortality risk." Everything has mortality risk at my age. "Don't do that. Don't make jokes." Her voice cracked slightly. "If you're going to kill yourself for money to leave me, at least have the decency to admit that's what you're doing." The words hit harder than he'd expected. "I'm not trying to kill myself, Em." "Then what are you trying to do? Tell me, because I genuinely don't understand." "Mom died begging to see you, and you were off giving speeches about aliens. Now you want to go live with them for 6 months, probably die in some experiment, and you think leaving me money makes that okay." He had no answer. The bourbon sat heavy in his stomach. Emily's breathing came harsh over the line. "You know what the worst part is? I don't even hate you for missing Mom's death anymore. I've processed that, worked through it in therapy. What I can't forgive is that you're still choosing to leave. You could spend whatever time you have left trying to rebuild something with me, with your granddaughter you've never even met. But instead, you're taking a suicide mission for science. Because that's easier than being present." "I'm not good at being present," he said quietly. "I never was. Your mother knew that. She married me anyway. And it killed her, not the cancer. You killed the part of her that believed people could change. She waited for you, Dad. Right up until the end, she waited." The line went silent, except for the faint hiss of distance. "I'm sorry," he said. Knowing it wasn't enough had never been enough. "So am I," Emily said. "Do what you want. You always have." She hung up before he could respond. Nathan stood holding the dead phone, staring at nothing. Through the window, the sun was setting, painting the desert in shades of red and gold, beautiful and utterly indifferent to human suffering. He envied it, that indifference. He made his decision the way he made most decisions these days, alone and without ceremony. He filled out the acceptance forms, signed the waivers that said he understood the risks and accepted them, wrote a brief email to Emily telling her he loved her even if he'd never been good at showing it. Then he booked a shuttle flight to Colorado and began packing the few things that mattered. 3 weeks later, he arrived at the integration habitat on a morning so clear and cold it hurt to breathe. The facility sprawled across a valley in the Rockies, all glass and steel, and the strange organic curves that marked Velan architectural influence. He'd expected something clinical, institutional. Instead, it looked almost beautiful, the buildings rising from the mountainside like they'd grown there naturally. A woman met him at the entrance, early 70s, with graying hair pulled back in a practical bun and eyes that had seen too much. "Dr. Hale, welcome. I'm Dr. Sarah Chen. We spoke on the phone." He shook her hand, noting the strength in her grip. "Just Nathan, please. I gave up the title when I gave up the work." She smiled, but it didn't reach her eyes. "We're glad you reconsidered retirement. Your expertise will be invaluable here." He followed her through corridors that hummed with technology he only partly understood, past labs where humans in white coats worked alongside Velan researchers, their tall forms moving with an alien grace. He'd seen Velan before, of course, but never this many in one place. They stood between 6 and 7 feet tall on average, their bodies covered in what looked like translucent gray skin embedded with patterns of darker crystalline structures. Their faces were almost human, if you didn't look too close at the extra joints in the jaw, the way their eyes caught light like cut gems. The habitat wing was more comfortable than he'd expected. Private rooms arranged around a central common area, large windows looking out at mountain vistas, the quiet hum of environmental systems keeping everything at perfect temperature. 6 other participants were already there, ranging in age from mid-50s to early 70s, a mix of backgrounds and reasons for volunteering. An engineer named Robert, a schoolteacher named Patricia, a veteran named Carl who moved with the careful stiffness of old injuries poorly healed. "We've paired you with specific Velan partners based on compatibility algorithms," Dr. Chen explained as she led him to his assigned quarters. "Your partner's name is Tsara'vel. She's been with the program since its inception, one of our most experienced integration specialists." The room was larger than his cabin, appointed with simple furniture and that same quality of light that made everything feel slightly unreal. A second bedroom connected through a shared living space. "For privacy," Chen said, "though we encourage participants to spend significant time together. The bonding process works best with sustained proximity." She left him to unpack, promising orientation would begin the following morning. Nathan set his single suitcase on the bed and looked around at what would be his home for the next 6 months, if he survived that long. He was hanging his few shirts in the closet when he heard the door to the other bedroom open. He turned, and there she was. Tsara'vel stood 6'8", her body a sculpture of geometric precision, crystalline patterns running beneath her skin like circuit boards of dark amber and deep gray. Her face held an alien beauty, eyes that caught the light and threw it back in shades of gold, features that were almost human but not quite, the uncanny valley made flesh. She wore simple clothes, adapted human style, but they couldn't hide the essential strangeness of her form. They stared at each other for a long moment. Nathan found himself holding his breath. "Dr. Nathan Hale," she said, her voice deeper than a human woman's, with harmonics that suggested multiple vocal cords. "I am Tsara'vel of the Valon Imperial Remnant. It appears we are to be partners." Her English was perfect, only slightly accented with something that made every syllable sound more deliberate, more weighted than it should be. He realized he was still staring and forced himself to speak. "Just Nathan. And I'm probably the least qualified person here, so I apologize in advance for whatever mistakes I'm about to make." Something in her face shifted, not quite a smile, but close. "In my experience, those who claim least qualification often prove most educable. Arrogance and ignorance are frequent companions." She moved past him into the shared living space, and he caught a scent like ozone and something floral he couldn't place. She was older than he'd first thought, he realized. Something in the way she moved, a weight to her presence that spoke of years accumulated. "Have you been briefed on the integration process?" she asked, settling into one of the chairs with a grace that made the furniture seem inadequate. "Only the basics. Some kind of nanotechnology you call essence. It's supposed to be compatible with human biology under the right conditions." "Essence is not nanotechnology," she corrected gently. "It is what you might call biotechnology, though even that term falls short. It is living, conscious, symbiotic material, created by a civilization older than either of our species. The Valon discovered it millennia ago. It is what allows us to live as long as we do, to heal from injuries that would kill most organic beings. And now you're testing whether humans can survive it." Something flickered in her golden eyes. "We are testing whether humans can be saved by it. There is a difference." Before he could ask what she meant, voices erupted from the common area outside. He heard shouting, then a crash, then sudden terrible silence. Tsara was on her feet and moving before he could react, her speed startling. He followed, his heart hammering. The common area had become chaos. Medical personnel rushed past, equipment clattering. He caught a glimpse through the crowd of someone on the floor, the veteran, Carl, his body convulsing. Blood ran from his nose and ears, and the skin of his chest had split open to reveal something dark and writhing beneath. "Everyone back," a doctor shouted. "Seal the room. This is a Code 7 rejection." Nathan felt hands pulling him away, back toward his quarters. Tsara stood rigid in the doorway, watching as they loaded Carl's seizing form onto a gurney. The man's eyes had rolled back, showing only whites, and his mouth gaped in a silent scream. They disappeared down the corridor, leaving only bloodstains on the floor and a smell like burning copper. "What happened?" Nathan asked, though he already knew. The 8% mortality rate, the adverse reactions, the careful language in the letter that had meant this, exactly this. "Essence rejection," Tsara said quietly. "His immune system attacked the integration. It happens sometimes, usually within the first 72 hours. Is he going to survive?" She turned to look at him, and in her eyes he saw something ancient and sad. No. Once rejection begins at that level, the cascade cannot be stopped. He will be dead within the hour. Nathan felt the bourbon he'd drunk on the flight threatening to come back up. They just watched him die. "They attempted to save him," Tsara said, "but some bodies simply cannot accept the gift. Or perhaps the gift cannot accept them. The essence is not merely technology. It has preferences." The doors to the common area opened again, and Dr. Chen emerged, her face professionally calm, but her eyes betrayed her. She looked directly at Nathan. "Dr. Hale, I need to speak with you. Now." He followed her to an office that overlooked the valley, mountains rising in the distance like teeth. She closed the door and activated a privacy field, the air shimmering slightly at the edges of the room. "Carl Richardson is dead," she said without preamble. "Catastrophic systemic rejection. His heart stopped 8 minutes ago." Nathan sat down without being invited. The letter said 8% mortality. Our projections suggested that older candidates would have better integration rates. We were wrong. She pulled up a holographic display, showing vital signs crashing, cellular structures collapsing. Carl was our second death in 3 weeks. Second, you're killing people and you didn't think to mention that in the recruitment materials. We disclosed the risks. Everyone here signed informed consent. Informed consent requires accurate information. 8% isn't accurate if you've killed 2 people already. Chen's professional mask slipped for just a moment, and he saw the exhaustion underneath. We're under significant pressure to make this work, Dr. Hale. The integration treaty requires us to demonstrate compatibility. If we fail, there are political consequences you can't imagine. So you're willing to kill how many people to prove a political point? To save humanity, she said quietly. The Valon aren't just refugees anymore, Nathan. They outnumber us 3-1 on the border colonies. Their technology is centuries ahead of ours. If we can't find a way to truly integrate, to become compatible at a biological level, we'll always be the inferior species. Second-class citizens on our own planet. He stared at her, understanding dawning. This isn't about cooperation. This is about survival of the fittest. You want to steal their longevity, their healing, make us into them. I want to make us equals. She deactivated the hologram. Carl's death will be reported as a pre-existing cardiac condition. We've already notified his family. The program continues. And if I walk out right now? Then you forfeit the compensation, violate your contract, and Emily receives nothing. She leaned forward. But you won't walk out. You came here to die doing something meaningful. At least that's what you told yourself. The truth is simpler. You came here because living was too hard. The words hit like a physical blow, mostly because they were true. Get some rest, Chen said, her professional mask sliding back into place. Orientation begins at 0800. And Nathan, do yourself a favor. Don't mention Carl's real cause of death to the other participants. Panic helps no one. He walked back to his quarters in a daze, the mountain air suddenly too thin, his chest tight. Sarah was waiting in the living space, standing by the window, backlit by the setting sun. She didn't turn when he entered. They told you it was cardiac failure, she said. A statement, not a question. He sank into a chair. You knew they would lie. It is not entirely a lie. His heart did fail. They simply omit the cause. She turned to face him. You are wondering if you should leave, if this risk is worth whatever brought you here. $500,000 for my daughter. Atonement for a lifetime of absence. Take your pick. Those are reasons to stay, but they are not reasons to live. There is a difference. He looked up at her, this alien being with her faceted skin and golden eyes, and felt something crack in his chest. Why are you here? He asked. Why do you do this knowing it might kill us? Sarah was silent for a long moment. When she spoke, her voice carried harmonics of something that might have been grief. Because my people owe yours a debt. When we arrived at your world, desperate and dying, you could have destroyed us. Instead, you gave us sanctuary. Even after the war, after we killed 40,000 of your kind, you allowed us to stay. This integration program, it is how we repay that mercy. By letting us experiment on ourselves, using your biology. By sharing what we have. Essence could extend human lifespans by centuries. It could eliminate most diseases, heal injuries that currently cripple and kill. If the integration succeeds, humanity gains what the Valon have possessed for millennia. A chance at longevity, or near enough to make no difference. And what do you gain? Absolution, she said simply, for the deaths we caused, for the war we brought to your world. He wanted to argue, to point out the moral complexities, the exploitation, the risks. But he was too tired, and the image of Carl's body splitting open was too fresh. Instead, he asked the question that had been gnawing at him since Chen's revelation. How many Valon have died in this program? Sarah's geometric patterns seemed to darken slightly. None. Essence cannot harm Valon. We created it, or rather, we were created alongside it. We are biologically inseparable. So only humans die. Only humans have the potential to evolve. She moved to sit across from him, her movements carrying that same uncanny grace. You asked why I am here, Nathan Hale. I will tell you the truth. 8 years ago, I had a sister. Her name was Tsara'vel. She was young, only 200 years by our counting, and she was brilliant. When your government first proposed integration trials, she volunteered. She believed, as I did, that union between our species was possible. Nathan felt dread building in his stomach. They injected her with modified human DNA, attempting reverse integration. The theory was that if Valon could carry human genetic material, it would prove compatibility. She died screaming, her body rejecting the foreign material, her essence turning against itself. It took 3 days. I held her while she burned from the inside out. Christ, Nathan whispered. Your people called it a tragic accident, a setback in the research. They paid compensation to her family, which was me. I was the only one left after the evacuation from our homeworld. She paused, and he saw her hands trembling slightly. I am here because I owe it to her memory to see if this madness can produce anything other than death. And because if I must lose more siblings, I would rather they be human strangers than Valon kin. The honesty of it left him breathless. I'm sorry, he said, for your loss, for what my government did. Do not apologize for sins you did not commit. She stood, moving back toward her room. Rest, Nathan Hale. Tomorrow they will begin your treatments. You should face them with whatever strength you still possess. She paused in the doorway, looking back at him. And Nathan, do not trust Director Chen completely. She serves interests larger than individual lives, yours or mine. But her voice softened, she also carries her own grief. My sister Tsara'vel died in those early trials. Dr. Chen was there. She tried to stop the procedure when she saw it failing. They overruled her. She has been attempting to atone ever since. Then she was gone, leaving him alone with the fading light and the weight of too many deaths. That night, Nathan couldn't sleep. He stood on the small balcony outside his room, looking up at stars that seemed closer here in the mountains. Somewhere out there, a Valon sun had exploded, consuming billions of lives in cosmic fire. And a handful of survivors had fled to Earth, only to find themselves in a new kind of hell, where their biology became a resource to be exploited, their guilt weaponized, their grief commodified. He heard singing, faint and wordless, coming from the next balcony. Sarah stood in the starlight, her bioluminescent patterns catching and refracting the pale glow. The song was alien, beautiful in a way that hurt, full of intervals that human vocal cords couldn't produce. It sounded like mourning. He didn't interrupt, just listened, and wondered if he was hearing the last songs of a dying species or the first hymns of a new one. The integration began 3 days later, after more tests and briefings and carefully worded consent forms. They gathered in a medical theater, the 6 remaining human participants and their Valon partners, while doctors explained the process. Essence would be introduced gradually over 6 weeks, allowing their immune systems to adapt. Nano-injections daily, increasing in concentration, monitoring for any signs of rejection. Carl's empty chair sat in the corner, a ghost no one acknowledged. The first injection felt like ice water spreading through Nathan's veins. He gasped, gripping the arms of the medical chair, while monitors tracked his vitals. Sarah stood nearby, her golden eyes fixed on him with an intensity that felt like being studied under a microscope. Pain is normal, the doctor said. Your body is learning to recognize the essence as self rather than invader. Breathe through it. He breathed, and the ice became heat, became pressure, became something almost pleasant. His vision sharpened, colors becoming more vivid. The ache in his arthritic joints faded to a distant memory. "How do you feel?" Tsara asked. "Young," he said, and heard the wonder in his own voice. "I feel young." Over the following weeks, the changes accelerated. His hair, which had been thinning and gray, grew back darker, shot through with silver but thick and vital. The age spots on his hands faded. His skin tightened, wrinkles smoothing, years falling away like shed clothing. He started sleeping better, needing less rest, waking with energy he hadn't felt since his 40s. The other participants experienced similar transformations. Patricia's chronic pain from decades of teaching disappeared. Robert's failing eyesight corrected itself. They were being remade, rebuilt from the cellular level up. But Nathan noticed something else, something the doctors didn't mention in their enthusiastic reports. Tsara was changing too, but in the opposite direction. She moved more slowly. Her faceted patterns seemed duller. She ate less, spent more time in her room. When she thought he wasn't looking, he caught her holding her side as if in pain. He confronted her one evening after their mandatory bonding session, which had consisted of her teaching him basic Valon philosophy, while he pretended not to notice how she winced when she moved. "Something's wrong," he said. "With you, don't lie to me." "I am not authorized to discuss certain aspects of the program with participants." "I'm not asking as a participant. I'm asking as the person who lives 10 feet away from you and can see you're in pain." She studied him for a long moment, those alien eyes reading something in his face. Then she made a decision. "Come with me." She led him through corridors he hadn't explored, down to a sublevel that required her biometric clearance. The lights here were dimmer, tinged with blue, and he could hear the hum of serious machinery, the kind used for purposes no one wanted to discuss in public. They passed rooms with viewing windows. Inside, he saw Valon in various states of distress, some unconscious, hooked to machines. Some looked withered, their geometric patterns dark and lifeless. In one room, a Valon lay completely still, and he realized with a jolt that they were looking at a corpse. "Tsara, what is this?" She stopped in front of a lab, gestured for him to look inside. Through the window, he saw what looked like a massive centrifuge, and inside it, something dark and liquid, pulsing with its own light. "That is essence in its pure form," she said, "harvested from Valon donors, or more accurately, extracted from us." Nathan felt his stomach turn. Extracted how? She held up her arm, and he saw for the first time the small ports embedded in her inner wrist, barely visible beneath the geometric patterns. "We are connected to you during sleep. While you rest, essence flows from our bodies into yours. It is why you heal, why you grow young, and it is why we weaken." He stepped back from the window, the implications crashing over him. "You're not giving us some kind of technology. You're giving us yourselves, your life force." "The program is built on simple principles," she said, her voice hollow. "Human bodies reject pure essence. But if it passes through a Valon host first, is filtered through our biology, it becomes acceptable to your immune systems. We are living conduits, and you are draining us." "How long have you known?" "Since the beginning. All of us knew. It is why we volunteered." "You're committing suicide, all of you." "We are repaying a debt," she corrected. "Your government gave us sanctuary when we had nowhere else to go. This is the price of that mercy." Nathan felt rage building, hot and clean. He grabbed her shoulders, feeling the hardness of crystalline bone beneath seemingly human flesh. "No government has the right to ask this. No debt is worth your lives." "Then what would you have us do?" She pulled away from him, and he saw tears in her golden eyes, though they didn't fall the way human tears did. They gathered and crystallized, falling like tiny diamonds. "Return to space. There is no home to return to. Our world is ash. We number in mere thousands scattered across your colonies. We are a dying species, Nathan. At least let our deaths purchase something of value. Not like this. He was shouting now, not caring who heard. Not you, not any of you. Why do you care? Her voice rose to match his. You came here to die. You said so yourself. What difference does it make if I die giving you life? Because I'm not worth it. The words tore out of him, raw and bleeding. I'm a 67-year-old failure who let his wife die alone. I've done nothing with my life that justifies stealing yours. Then live well enough to justify it, she said quietly. That is all any of us can do. They stood in the blue-tinted corridor, breathing hard, crystalline tears scattered on the floor between them like fallen stars. I'm going to stop this, Nathan said. I'll go to the media, expose what they're doing here. And destroy the treaty? Plunge Earth and what remains of Valon into war? She shook her head. You cannot save me, Nathan Hale. I am already dying. My sister died in agony. I choose this. At least my death will mean something. It means they're murdering you and calling it science. Perhaps. She turned away back toward the elevator. But I have made my choice. The question is whether you will make yours. You can leave. Refuse further treatment. The essence already in your system will sustain you for years. You could return to your daughter, your granddaughter, live the time you have left. And leave you here to die for nothing. Not for nothing. For the hope that someday your species and mine will truly be one. That the war will be forgotten. That my sister's death and my own will be the foundation of something better. She stepped into the elevator, and he followed, the doors closing on the secret floor and its terrible truths. They rode up in silence. When they reached their floor, she stopped him with a hand on his arm. I should tell you something else, before you make your decision. He waited. You asked once what my people gain from this integration. I told you absolution, but there is more. Her voice dropped to barely a whisper. The Valon who volunteer for this program, we are all criminals, war criminals. I was a commander in the battle at Defense Station Meridian. I gave the order that killed 40,000 humans. Nathan felt the floor tilt beneath him. What? Your government knows. It is why we were chosen. The program serves as both research and punishment. We die slowly, giving life to the species we slaughtered. Poetic in its way. The doors opened onto their shared quarters. He didn't move. How many did you kill personally? Thousands. She looked at him with those alien eyes, and he saw no excuses there, no justifications. We were fired upon. I responded with overwhelming force. I followed my training, and I have lived with the weight of those deaths every day since. He should have been horrified, should have felt rage, revulsion. Instead, he felt something more complicated, more human. You're telling me this now because you think it will make it easier for me to let you die. I am telling you this now because you deserve to know whose life you're trying to save. She stepped out of the elevator. Good night, Nathan Hale. Sleep well if you can. He stood in the corridor long after she'd closed her door, attempting to reconcile the being he'd begun to care for with the war criminal she claimed to be. Attempting to decide if redemption was possible, if sacrifice could truly wash away the stain of mass murder. He thought about Margaret, who'd forgiven him for missing her death even though she'd had every right to hate him. He thought about Emily, who couldn't forgive and maybe shouldn't. He thought about the 40,000 dead, whose names he'd never know, whose families still mourned them. And he thought about Sarah singing to the stars, carrying the weight of worlds lost and crimes that could never be undone. That night he dreamed of Margaret. She stood in their old kitchen, the one in Virginia before they'd moved for his work, before the promotions and the acclaim and the slow dissolution of everything that mattered. She was young again, the way she'd looked when they first met, her hair dark and her smile bright. "You look good, Nate," she said, "almost like yourself again." "I'm stealing it," he told her, "this youth. It's not mine, it's hers." "Everything is stolen," Margaret said gently. "Time, health, love. We take what we can and hope we use it well. The question isn't whether you deserve it. The question is what you'll do with it." "I don't know," he said. "I never knew. That was always my problem." She crossed the kitchen and took his hands, and he felt the warmth of her touch, the realness of it even in dream. "Then figure it out," she said. "You've got time now. Don't waste it the way you wasted ours." He woke to find himself weeping, his pillow damp, and Sarah standing in his doorway. "I heard you crying," she said softly. "I wanted to ensure you were not in physical distress." He sat up, wiping his eyes. Just dreaming, just ghosts. "The dead do not leave us easily." She moved into the room, and he saw she was wearing sleeping clothes that looked absurdly normal on her alien frame. "May I sit?" He nodded, and she settled into the chair by his window. The moon was up, 3/4 full, painting everything in silver. "Tell me about your wife," Sarah said. "You have never spoken of her except to say she is dead." So he told her about meeting Margaret in a xenobiology seminar where she'd challenged every assumption he'd made about non-terrestrial life. About their wedding in a small chapel in Virginia, her parents skeptical of this driven young scientist with more ambition than sense. About Emily's birth and how terrified he'd been holding that tiny human life, knowing he was responsible for keeping it safe. About the slow accumulation of absences, conferences, missed family dinners, important moments observed through video calls. About landing in Virginia 18 hours too late, walking into a hospital room where the bed was already empty, where Emily looked at him with eyes like chips of ice and said she waited as long as she could. "I thought I was doing important work," he finished. "I thought I was changing the world. But I was just running away from the small, sacred space where I was needed most." Sarah was quiet for a long time. When she spoke, her voice carried harmonics of understanding. "I too have lost someone I loved. My wife, Tsara'vel, we bonded young by Valon standards, only 300 years together before the evacuation. She made it onto a different ship. I never saw her again." He looked up surprised. "Your wife?" "Valon do not gender pair the way humans do. We bond with those whose consciousness resonates with our own. Kira was my resonance. She made me laugh. She challenged me. When the sun began its death spiral, she was the one who insisted we had to attempt to save as many as we could, even though we knew most would die in the exodus." "Did she make it to another world?" "I do not know. Communications between the refugee fleets were sporadic. The last I heard, her ship was headed toward the Centauri colonies. That was 14 years ago. For all I know, she is dead, or she lives and believes I am dead. Either way, we are lost to each other." "I'm sorry," Nathan said, "for all of it." "As am I," she stood, moving back toward the door. "But grief is the price we pay for love, is it not? We carry our dead with us. We honor them by continuing to live, to choose, to matter. Your Margaret would want that for you, I think." "How do you know?" "Because she loved you enough to wait. That is not a small thing." She left him alone with the moonlight and his ghosts. He sat in the chair where she'd been, thinking about love and loss and the debts we owe to the dead. Thinking about 40,000 humans killed by this being who just comforted him in his grief. Thinking about whether redemption was possible or just another lie we told ourselves to make the unbearable bearable. He must have dozed because he startled awake to the sound of alarms shrieking through the facility. Red lights strobed in the corridors. Automated voices announced emergency protocols, instructing everyone to remain in quarters. Sarah burst from her room, already dressed, moving with a speed that suggested soldiers' training. "Stay here," she commanded, and was gone before he could argue. But Nathan had never been good at following orders. He pulled on clothes and stepped into the corridor, following the sound of shouting and running feet. Other participants emerged from their rooms, confused and frightened. He pushed past them, toward the medical wing. The doors were sealed, guards posted. Through the windows, he could see chaos. Doctors running, blood on the walls. And in the center of it all, a human participant he recognized, Robert the engineer, convulsing on the floor while dark tendrils writhed beneath his skin. "Rejection," someone shouted. "Massive systemic rejection. Get the suppressors now." But Nathan knew from the way the doctors moved, the panic in their eyes, that there were no suppressors that could stop this. Robert was dying the same way Carl had died, the same way all the failures had died, his body tearing itself apart attempting to expel the foreign presence growing inside him. He watched Robert's eyes roll back, watched blood pour from every orifice, watched a human being dissolve into meat and pain. The man's Valon partner stood to one side, crystalline tears falling, and Nathan saw in her face not just grief but guilt, the knowledge that her gift had become poison. Robert went still. The monitors flatlined. A doctor called time of death, and the chaos transformed into the mechanical motions of cleanup, of covering the corpse, of sanitizing the space where a man had just stopped being. Nathan felt hands on his shoulders, pulling him away. Tsara, her face set in hard lines. "You should not have seen that," she said. "I had to." He was shaking, he realized. "Because this is what you're doing to yourselves for us. This is the price. This is the risk. There is a difference." He turned on her, rage and grief boiling over. "Stop being so calm about death. Stop acting like this is acceptable. People are dying, Sarah. You're dying. And for what? So humans can live a few decades longer. So we can pretend we've evolved when all we're doing is parasitizing you." His voice echoed in the empty corridor. She didn't flinch. "Yes," she said simply, "that is exactly what this is, and I choose it anyway." "Why? Tell me why you think your life is worth so little." "Because I have already died, Nathan Hale." She stepped close to him, and he saw the exhaustion in her eyes, the weight she carried. "I died when my world burned. I died when my wife was lost. I died when I gave the order that killed 40,000 of your kind. What remains is just biological process. At least let it serve some purpose. Your purpose is not to be a battery for my second chance." "Then what should my purpose be?" She grabbed his shirt, pulled him close enough that he could see the geometric structures beneath her skin pulsing with fading light. "Tell me, wise human, what should I do with the years I have left? Mourn in isolation? Seek forgiveness from species that will never grant it? Or give what I have to those who might actually benefit?" "You could live," he said, "not for redemption or debt or guilt, just live, for yourself." "I have forgotten how to do that." They stood pressed together in the corridor, breathing hard, something passing between them that was not quite understanding but not quite anger either. Something raw and honest and painful. The moment broke when Director Chen's voice came over the intercom. "All participants and partners, report to the common area immediately. Mandatory briefing." They pulled apart, not looking at each other, and walked side by side to face whatever revelation was coming next. The common area felt like a funeral home. 3 empty chairs now, 3 dead in 6 weeks. The surviving participants sat grim-faced while their Valon partners stood behind them, a tableau of integration's cost. Dr. Chen stood at the front, flanked by security, and Nathan noticed for the first time the way her jaw was set, the tension in her shoulders. She was preparing for a fight. "I won't insult you with platitudes," she began. "Robert Richardson's death brings our failure rate to unacceptable levels. The Integration Council has ordered a full review of protocols." She paused. But I'm not here to announce suspension of the program. I'm here to tell you the truth. Something I should have done from the beginning. She activated a holographic display, and Nathan saw cellular structures, DNA helixes intertwining with something alien and beautiful. This is successful integration, Chen said. Human and Veilon biology in perfect symbiosis. We've achieved it in laboratory conditions with tissue samples. The problem is translating that success to living subjects. So keep experimenting in labs, Patricia said. Stop killing people. We can't. Chen's voice hardened. Because integration requires conscious participation from both partners. The essence bonds to intent, to will, to the intangible aspects of consciousness we don't fully understand. It has to be living, aware, choosing. Choosing to die, apparently, Robert's partner said, her voice breaking on the last word. Chen looked directly at Nathan. Dr. Hale asked me once what we gain from this program. I told him political stability, biological equality. That was true but incomplete. The full truth is that Veilon are dying. Your species is dying. She turned to address the Veilon. Essence depletion syndrome. Your own scientists confirmed it 3 years ago. Without the constant renewal that came from your homeworld's unique stellar radiation, your essence is degrading. You have perhaps 50 years before the last of you dies out. The room erupted. Veilon and humans both shouting questions, denials, accusations. Chen waited for the chaos to subside. This integration program is not charity, she continued. It's a last desperate attempt at species survival. If we can successfully bond human and Veilon biology, if we can create true hybrids, then Veilon consciousness can continue. Not in pure form, but as part of something new. Human Veilon, the next stage of both our evolutions. Or you could have just told us that, Nathan said, his voice cutting through the noise. Instead of letting us think we were volunteers in a research program when we're actually participants in forced evolution. Would you have come if we'd told you the truth? Chen challenged. That we're attempting to merge 2 species before one goes extinct. That we're racing against a cosmic clock with no idea if we can win. He wanted to say yes, wanted to believe he would have made the choice with full information. But he wasn't sure. And from the silence around him, neither was anyone else. I'm not asking you to stay, Chen said. Anyone who wants to leave can. Your compensation will be honored regardless. But understand that if this program fails, we lose more than research data. We lose the Veilon entirely. And humanity loses its chance to become something greater than what we are. She deactivated the display and walked out, leaving them to sit with the weight of cosmic stakes. Nathan turned to look at Sarah, who stood statue still, her face unreadable. You knew, he said, about the essence degradation, about your species dying. We have known for some time, she confirmed quietly. And you didn't think we deserved that information. Would it have changed anything? She moved to sit beside him, and he saw how the simple motion exhausted her. We are dying, Nathan. You are dying. Perhaps together we can make something that survives us both. Is that not worth the attempt? Not if it's built on lies and exploitation. All of evolution is built on death and desperation. She took his hand, and he felt the coolness of her skin, the crystalline hardness of her bones. I am tired of fighting, tired of mourning. If my death can purchase even the possibility of continuance, I choose that. Not for redemption, not for debt, but because the alternative is oblivion for everything I was, everything my species was. Her hand trembled in his, and he realized she was terrified. Not of dying, but of being forgotten, of her entire civilization dissolving into cosmic dust, with no one to remember they had ever existed. He thought about Margaret, about the way her memory lived in him, shaping his choices even 8 years after her death. He thought about the 40,000 humans Tsara had killed, whose memories lived in families still grieving. He thought about Carl and Robert and the others, gone but not erased, their deaths marking the price of transformation. And he made a choice. "I'm staying," he said, "not because I think I deserve a second chance, but because if we're going to do this, if we're going to attempt to merge two dying species into something that might survive, then we're going to do it honestly. No more lies, no more hidden costs. We face this together or not at all." Sarah's crystalline tears fell, sparkling in the light. "Thank you," she whispered. Around them, the other participants were making their own choices. Some left immediately, unwilling to bear the weight of what they'd learned. Others stayed, driven by curiosity or desperation or the same stubborn refusal to quit that had brought them here in the first place. By the time the sun set, they were 6 where they'd been 12. 6 humans, 6 Valon, betting everything on an impossible dream. That night, Nathan stood on his balcony and called Emily. She answered on the 3rd ring, wary. "Dad, what's wrong?" He told her everything. The deaths, the lies, the truth about integration. He told her about Sarah's war crimes and her dying species. He told her about choosing to stay anyway, knowing it might kill him. When he finished, Emily was quiet for so long he thought she'd hung up. "Then, I'm bringing Margaret to meet you." "What?" "Your granddaughter. She's 3 years old and she deserves to know her grandfather while he's still alive. Whatever else you are, whatever mistakes you've made, you're still her blood." She paused. "And maybe it's time I stopped punishing you for not being perfect. Mom wouldn't have wanted that." Nathan felt his throat close up. I don't know if I'll survive this program. The odds are not good." "I know, that's why I'm coming." Her voice softened. "You were right, what you said in your email. You do love me. You've just never been good at showing it. So show me now, show Margaret. Be present for whatever time you have left." "I'll try," he promised. "I'll actually try this time." "Good. Because if you die in that program and I never got to say goodbye properly, I will find a way to bring you back just so I can kill you myself." He laughed, surprised to find he still could. "I love you, sweetheart." "I know, Dad. I love you too. Despite everything, I really do." After she hung up, he stood looking at the stars, feeling something shift inside him. Not hope exactly, but something adjacent to it. The possibility that the time he had left, however much or little, could be lived better than the time behind him. He heard singing again, that alien melody that sounded like grief transformed into beauty. Sarah on her balcony, communing with stars that had watched her world die. He thought about joining her, about sitting in the darkness and listening, about being present with someone else's pain instead of running from it. Tomorrow, he promised himself. Tomorrow he would ask about her wife, her world, the things she'd lost. Tomorrow he would attempt to see her not as alien or criminal or dying species, but as a being who'd suffered and endured and still found the strength to sing. But tonight, he let her have her solitude. Some griefs were too vast to be shared. He went to bed and dreamed of Margaret and Sarah standing together in a garden full of flowers that existed on no world he'd ever known. And when he woke, he couldn't tell if it was prophecy or just the lonely hope of a man who'd spent too long running from the people who needed him to stay. The integration continued, and Nathan felt himself changing in ways that went beyond physical rejuvenation. The world looked different through eyes that could see deeper into the electromagnetic spectrum, that caught nuances of light and shadow invisible to purely human perception. He could hear the harmonics in Sarah's voice that he'd missed before, the layers of meaning carried in frequencies his old ears couldn't process. And he could feel her weakening, the slow drain of life force flowing from her body into his, making him younger while she aged beyond her years. It was obscene. It was miraculous. It was happening whether he wanted it or not. 3 months into the program, Emily arrived with Margaret. Nathan met them in the visitors' center, his heart hammering with nervousness he hadn't felt in decades. The little girl hid behind her mother's legs, peeking out with dark eyes that were pure Margaret Chen, his wife's legacy written in his granddaughter's face. "Hi, Margaret," he said, kneeling to her level. "I'm your grandfather, Nathan." "You look too young to be a grandpa," the child said with perfect 3-year-old logic. Emily laughed despite herself. "She has a point. You look younger than I do now." "The essence is effective," he admitted. "If nothing else, I'll die pretty." "That's not funny," Emily said, but she was smiling. "Introduce me to your alien friend." Sarah emerged from her room, and Nathan saw Emily's professional mask slip for just a moment, genuine awe breaking through. "She's taller than I expected." "We Veilon are a people of extremes," Sarah said gently. She knelt, bringing herself closer to Margaret's eye level. "Hello, small one. I am Sarah. I am helping your grandfather become healthy again." "Are you an alien?" Margaret asked with that blunt curiosity children possessed. "I am. Is that frightening?" Margaret considered seriously. "No, you have pretty sparkles like my night light." Sarah's geometric patterns pulsed slightly, and Nathan realized it was laughter. "Thank you. That is the kindest thing anyone has said to me in some time." They spent the afternoon together, awkward and tentative and more real than anything Nathan had experienced in years. Emily asked questions about the program, about safety protocols, about what would happen if things went wrong. Sarah answered with painful honesty, hiding nothing, and Nathan saw his daughter's respect for the Veilon growing despite herself. Margaret, for her part, was fearless. She wanted to touch Sarah's faceted patterns, to hear more about the stars where she came from, to know if all aliens could sing like Sarah did. And Sarah, this ancient warrior who'd killed thousands, was gentle and patient in a way that made Nathan's chest ache. "They're leaving tomorrow," Emily said as they watched Margaret play in the garden outside. "I just wanted you to meet her, to see her while you still could." "I'm glad you came," Nathan said. "Both of you." Emily looked at him, really looked, and he saw her attempting to reconcile the father she remembered with this rejuvenated stranger. "You're different, not just physically. Something in you has changed." "I'm attempting to be present, to not run away this time." "Good," she squeezed his hand. "Because whatever time you have left, Dad, I want to be part of it, really part of it." That night, after they'd gone, Nathan found Sarah on her balcony again. He joined her without asking, and they stood together watching the stars emerge. "Your granddaughter is delightful," Sarah said. "She has your wife's eyes." "Everyone says that." He paused. "Thank you for being kind to her. You didn't have to be." "Why would I not be? Children carry no guilt for the sins of their ancestors. She is innocent of everything except existence." He wanted to ask about her own family, about children she might have had, about the life she'd lost when her world burned. But before he could find the words, alarms began shrieking again, red lights strobing, and they were running toward the medical wing where someone else was dying, and the cost of integration was being written again in blood and screaming, and the terrible mathematics of evolution purchased with pain. The woman convulsing on the medical table was named Patricia, the retired schoolteacher who told stories about her 40 years in classrooms, about generations of children she'd shaped and guided. Now her body twisted in ways bodies shouldn't move, bones breaking under the pressure of essence rejection, her screams cutting through the sterile air like broken glass. Nathan stood frozen outside the observation window, Sarah beside him, both of them helpless witnesses to another death. The medical team worked with practiced efficiency, but he could see in their movements the futility of it. They'd seen this before. They knew how it ended. Patricia's Veilon partner, a male named Corthan, stood at the foot of the bed, his bioluminescent patterns pulsing erratically with what Nathan had learned to recognize as profound distress. The old teacher's body arched one final time, something dark and viscous pouring from her mouth, and then she went still. The monitors flatlined. A doctor called time of death at 0347. 5 dead in 4 months, half the original participants gone. Nathan turned away from the window, his stomach churning. Tsara's hand found his shoulder steadying him, but he could feel the tremor in her touch. She was weaker now, noticeably so. Her faceted patterns had dulled from vibrant amber to something closer to rust. She moved carefully, like someone aware their bones might snap. The parasitic drain was accelerating. "We should return to quarters," she said quietly. "There is nothing more to witness here." They walked back through corridors that felt more like a tomb with each passing death. Nathan's rejuvenated body moved with ease, his 67 years stripped away to something that felt like 50, maybe younger. His reflection in the polished walls showed dark hair with silver threads, smooth skin, the posture of vitality. He was being rebuilt with Patricia's death, with Carl's and Robert's and all the others, their failed integrations somehow feeding his successful one. The guilt of it sat in his chest like a stone. In their shared quarters, Tsara collapsed into a chair with a sigh that sounded like wind through broken structures. Nathan poured her water, watched her drink with hands that shook slightly. "How long?" he asked. "How long do you have?" She set the glass down carefully. "Dr. Chen estimates 3 months, perhaps 4 if I am fortunate." Dr. Sarah Chen. Nathan had grown to respect her over these months, the woman who carried her own grief like armor. She'd been there when Sarah's sister died, had witnessed Margaret's botched integration 8 years ago. The weight of those failures drove her work on the reversal protocol, the theoretical process that might undo what they'd done. "What happens when you die?" he asked. "Do I just stop improving, or do I start rejecting too?" "The data is inconclusive. You may stabilize at your current state. You may continue aging normally from this point. Or," Tsara paused, "the essence may seek a new host, may attempt to bond with another Valon. The process is not well understood." "Because you're all dying anyway," he said bitterly. "So there's no long-term data." "Precisely." He stood and paced, energy thrumming through his improved body, energy stolen from the dying alien woman watching him. "I can't do this anymore. I can't keep taking from you." "You have no choice. The bonding is established. Severing it now would kill us both." "Then we find another way." He stopped pacing, an idea forming. "What about reversal? If essence can flow from you to me, can it flow back?" Sarah's eyes widened slightly, the first genuine surprise he'd seen her show. "In theory, yes, but the procedure has never been successfully tested. The mortality rate in simulations was over 80%. Better than 100%, which is what you're facing now." "Nathan," her voice carried harmonics of something like affection, "you would risk your life, your rejuvenation, everything you have gained to save me." "I would risk it to stop being a parasite. There's a difference." "Is there?" She studied him with those golden eyes. "You are changing, Nathan Hale. When you arrived, you were a man waiting to die. Now you fight for life, even if that life is not your own. Maybe dying for something is easier than living with nothing. Or perhaps you have found something worth living for." The words hung between them, heavy with implications neither was ready to examine. The moment broke when Nathan's phone chimed. "Emily," the message terse. "Call me. Now." He stepped onto the balcony for privacy, the mountain air cold and clean, stars scattered overhead like civilization had never touched the sky. Emily answered on the first ring. "I've been researching your program," she said without preamble. 5 participants dead. Another 3 withdrew after signing NDAs so restrictive they can't even tell their families what happened. You're in a death trap, Dad. I know, he said. I've seen them die. I'm watching my partner die right now slowly to keep me alive. Then leave, walk away. You've already gotten younger. Take what you have and come home. It's not that simple. It never is with you. Her voice broke slightly. I brought Margaret to meet you. I opened the door to reconciliation. And you're going to throw it away by dying in some government experiment that's killing everyone involved. I'm attempting to save someone, M. Someone who's dying because of me. You're attempting to run away again, just in a different direction this time. Emily took a shaky breath. I've been talking to some journalists. Investigative types who have been hearing rumors about integration project. They want to go public, expose what's happening there. But they need someone on the inside willing to testify. Nathan's chest tightened. That would violate my NDA. I'd lose the compensation. You might lose your life anyway. At least this way it would mean something. He looked back through the window at Tsara, sitting motionless in the chair, her alien form luminous in the low light. If I blow this up, the program shuts down. The Valon who are here, who volunteered, they did it for a reason. To save their species. By dying for hours. That's not salvation, Dad. That's exploitation. What if it's both? What if this is the only chance either species has? Emily was quiet for a long moment. Then you're more lost than I thought. She hung up without goodbye. Nathan stood in the cold, phone dead in his hand, and wondered when doing the right thing had become so impossibly complicated. The next morning, he found Dr. Sarah Chen in her lab, surrounded by holographic displays of cellular structures, essence patterns, the beautiful, terrible mathematics of forced evolution. She looked up as he entered, unsurprised. I was wondering when you'd come, she said. Sit, we need to talk. He sat. She deactivated the displays and poured them both coffee from a battered thermos, the mundane gesture oddly comforting in this place of cosmic stakes. Your daughter contacted you, Chen said, about going public. How did you know? Because I'm the one who put her in touch with the journalists. She sipped her coffee, watching his reaction. This program is wrong, Nathan, not the science. The science is revolutionary, but the implementation, the way they're using Valon as disposable batteries, it violates every ethical principle I've spent my career upholding. Then why are you still here? Because someone needs to document the truth. And because, she set her cup down carefully, there might be another way. A way to save both species without this parasitic nightmare. I asked Tsara about reversal protocols, he said. She said they were 80% fatal. In the simulations we ran 5 years ago, yes, but I've continued the research in secret. Chen pulled up new data, equations that meant nothing to Nathan but carried the weight of desperate hope. I believe I can reverse the essence flow, return what you've taken, stabilize Tsara's degradation. But it requires something the original simulations didn't account for. What? Conscious cooperation from both partners. The essence bonds to will, to intent. If both participants choose the reversal, truly commit to it, the mortality rate drops to approximately 50%. Still a coin flip. Better odds than Tsara has now, and better than you'll have if she dies and the essence destabilizes in your system. Nathan stared at the data, his rejuvenated mind processing faster than his old one could have. What happens if we survive? Do I go back to being 67? Do I age normally from there? You'd likely age faster than normal for a period, reclaiming the years the essence borrowed. 5, maybe 10 years of accelerated aging. But then you'd stabilize. She hesitated. There's something else you should know about Margaret. What about her? Your wife, my sister, she didn't die of cancer. The world tilted. What? Chen pulled up medical records, death certificates, autopsy reports. She was part of the first integration trials, 8 years ago in the earliest phase of the program. She volunteered, attempting to cure her cancer through essence therapy. Nathan couldn't breathe. That's not possible. I was there. I saw the cancer. The cancer was real, but it was treatable. 90% survival rate with conventional therapy. She chose integration because it promised not just survival but rejuvenation. A second chance at life with you. No, she wouldn't have done that without telling me. She attempted to tell you, 3 times according to her journal. Chen's voice was gentle, merciless, but you were always traveling, always at conferences. So she enrolled without your knowledge, thinking she'd surprise you when it worked. And it didn't work. The procedure was botched. Director Volker was part of the original team. He made a critical error in the essence introduction, caused a rejection cascade. Margaret's death was covered up as natural cancer progression. Your wife didn't die because you weren't there, Nathan. She died because the same people running this program killed her through incompetence and then lied about it. Nathan stood on legs that didn't feel connected to his body. He walked to the window, stared out at mountains that had stood for millions of years and would stand for millions more, indifferent to human suffering and human lies. Does Tsara know? He asked, his voice not his own. No, none of the current Valon partners know about the early failures. They were told the program was new, that human mortality was an unfortunate but unavoidable risk. Show me everything. Chen pulled up files, dozens of them, documenting the integration project's real history. 23 human participants in the early trials, 19 dead. 4 survivors who'd been paid massive settlements and sworn to silence. Margaret's name in the list of deceased, her files stamped with classifications and redactions, the truth buried under layers of bureaucratic murder. There were photos. Margaret in a hospital gown, looking hopeful. Margaret hooked to machines, her body beginning to reject. Margaret's last moments, caught on medical cameras, her face twisted in agony while doctors scrambled and director James Volker, younger then but still recognizable, shouted orders that came too late. Nathan watched his wife die on a screen 8 years after he'd thought he'd processed her death, and felt something in him break cleanly in half. Where is he? Nathan asked. Where's Volker? Administrative building, 3rd floor. But Nathan, if you confront him now, you'll be removed from the program. You'll lose access to the reversal protocol. I don't care. Yes, you do. You care about Tsara. You care about stopping this from happening to others. Chen gripped his arm. Channel this rage into something useful. Help me expose this properly, legally, so they can't bury it again. He wanted to refuse, wanted to find Volker and wrap his rejuvenated hands around the man's throat until he answered for Margaret's death. But Chen was right. Violence would change nothing. Documentation, testimony, legal exposure, that was the weapon that could actually wound. What do you need from me? He asked. Your consent for the reversal procedure, on record, and Tsara's. If we can prove that willing cooperation creates successful outcomes, it undermines the entire parasitic model. Proves integration can be mutual instead of extractive. When? Soon. She's deteriorating faster than anticipated. Another month, maybe 2, and it will be too late. Then we do it in 2 weeks. That gives me time to prepare her, to make sure she understands what we're attempting. And time for you to make peace with whatever happens, Chen said quietly. The procedure could kill you both. You need to be ready for that. I've been ready to die since Margaret did. I'm just finally finding reasons to want to live. He left the lab and went looking for Tsara. found her in the meditation garden the Veilon had created, a space of crystalline sculptures and harmonic wind chimes that sang in frequencies just below human hearing. She sat on a bench, her body still except for the faint pulse of her geometric patterns, and he knew she was praying to whatever gods the Veilon believed in, if any. "Nathan," she said without opening her eyes, "your emotional state is turbulent. I can feel it through our bond." He sat beside her, and the words came pouring out. About Margaret's real death. About Volker's incompetence and the cover-up. About the early trials and the bodies buried under bureaucratic lies. About his rage and grief and the desperate need to make it mean something. Sarah listened in silence until he finished, then opened her eyes and looked at him with something like sorrow. "I am sorry," she said, "for your loss, for the lies, for all of it." "Did you know about the early trials?" "I knew there had been failures. I did not know the details had been concealed from you. Or," she paused, "that your wife was among them. Dr. Chen is Margaret's sister. I did not make the connection until now. The grief she carries makes more sense. They're using us, all of us, humans and Veilon both, grinding us up in the name of progress." Yes, she stood, moved to one of the crystalline sculptures, traced its surface with one long finger. "But what is the alternative? My species is dying, Nathan. Yours is being offered a path to evolution. If some must die to purchase that future, is it not worth the cost?" "Not if the cost is lying about it. Not if it's built on exploitation and murder. All civilization is built on death. The question is whether the deaths serve a purpose or merely feed the machine." He stood and faced her, close enough to see the fractures spreading through her faceted patterns, the visible signs of her deterioration. "There's another way. Dr. Chen has developed a reversal protocol. She thinks we can survive it if we both choose it consciously." "Reversal." Sarah's voice carried harmonics of disbelief. "You would give back what you have gained." "I would give back what I stole. Yes." "Nathan." She cupped his face with one cool hand, and he felt the weakness in her grip. "You are not responsible for my choice. I volunteered knowing the cost." "You volunteered based on lies. They told you it was the only way. But if there's another path, shouldn't we take it? A path that might kill us both. We're both dying anyway. You faster than me, but the end is the same. At least this way we choose it together instead of you sacrificing yourself for my comfort." Her golden eyes searched his face. "Why does my survival matter so much to you?" "Because," he started, then stopped, forced himself to honesty. "Because I'm tired of watching people I care about die while I do nothing. Because you deserve better than to be used up and discarded. Because," he hesitated, "because somewhere in these months of living 10 feet apart and sharing morning coffee and listening to you sing to stars that don't sing back, you became someone I can't imagine losing." "Nathan Hale." Her voice was soft, wondering. "You speak of caring. But I am the one who killed 40,000 of your kind. I am a war criminal wearing the mask of a volunteer. How can you care for such a being?" "The same way you care for a man who let his wife die alone. We're both carrying sins we can't wash away. Maybe that's why we understand each other." She was quiet for a long time, her hand still on his face, her alien features unreadable. Then, "Tell me about this reversal protocol. Everything." They spent the next 2 weeks preparing. Dr. Chen ran simulations, refined the procedure, documented everything with the meticulous care of someone building a legal case. Nathan met with Emily via video calls, told her about the plan, watched his daughter cycle through fear and anger and reluctant acceptance. "You're really going to do this," Emily said during their last call before the procedure. "Risk everything you've gained." "I'm going to attempt to fix something I helped break. That's all." "If you die," she said, her voice thick, "I'm going to be so angry at you." If I die, I won't be around to care. But M, if I live, I want to be part of your life. Really part of it. Not just obligation calls and holiday cards. I want to know Margaret, watch her grow up, be the grandfather I never got to be. Then don't die, his daughter said simply. That's all I ask, just don't die. The night before the reversal, Nathan couldn't sleep. He stood on his balcony watching the stars, and Sarah emerged from her room to join him. They stood in comfortable silence until she began to sing, that alien melody he'd grown to love, full of loss and beauty and defiance of the dark. When she finished, he said, "Tell me about your wife. About Kira. You've never really talked about her." Sarah was quiet so long he thought she wouldn't answer. Then, Tsara'vel was light itself. Where I was stone, she was flame. Where I dealt in war, she dealt in art. She created sculptures from living crystal, pieces that would grow and change over centuries. She believed beauty was the highest form of resistance against entropy. Did she make it to the colonies? I do not know. The last transmission I received, her ship was headed toward Centauri space. That was 14 years ago. For all I know, she found sanctuary and built a new life. Or her ship failed and she died in the cold dark between stars. The not knowing is its own kind of death. If we survive tomorrow, Nathan said, we'll find out. Together. We'll search the colony records, track down the refugee manifests. We'll find out what happened to her. And if she lives, if she has moved on, built a new existence without me, then at least you'll know. And you can choose what comes next from a place of truth instead of hope and fear. Sarah turned to look at him, starlight catching in her golden eyes. You are an optimist, Nathan Hale. Despite everything, you still believe in happy endings. I believe in attempting. That's all, just attempting. She reached out and took his hand, her crystalline skin cool against his merely human warmth. Then let us attempt together, whatever comes. They stood holding hands under alien stars, two dying beings from dying species, and for a moment the universe felt less vast, less cold. The procedure was scheduled for 0800. Nathan woke before dawn, showered, dressed in the medical gown they'd provided. His body felt strong, young, borrowed vitality thrumming through every cell. In a few hours, that might all reverse, or he might be dead. The odds were distressingly even. Sarah emerged from her room looking frailer than ever, her movements careful, her faceted patterns barely luminous. But her spine was straight and her voice was steady when she said, "I am ready." They walked to the medical wing together, past observation windows, where the remaining participants watched with fear and hope in their faces. Dr. Chen met them at the procedure room, her expression professionally calm, but her eyes betraying her nervousness. "Director Volker will be observing," she said quietly. "I couldn't keep him out, but I've documented everything. If this works, if you both survive, it proves the parasitic model is unnecessary. It changes everything." "And if we don't survive?" Nathan asked. "Then I'll make sure your deaths are the last. I'll burn this program to the ground. My sister deserves that much." "Comforting," Sarah murmured. The procedure room was all white surfaces and gleaming equipment, machines that hummed with purpose. They were directed to adjacent beds, positioned close enough to hold hands. Sensors attached to their bodies, monitoring every function. Dr. Chen moved between them, checking readings, making final adjustments. Through the observation window, Nathan could see Director Volker watching, his face impassive. The man who'd killed Margaret through incompetence and covered it up with lies. The man who'd built a program on exploitation and called it progress. Nathan felt rage flare hot and clean, then forced it down. Later. If he survived, there would be time for justice later. "The procedure is simple in theory," Chen explained. "We've established a counter-flow channel in the essence bond. When activated, It will reverse the current direction. Nathan's essence will flow back to Tsara, undoing the integration, returning what was taken. And the risks? Tsara asked. Massive systemic shock for both of you. Your bodies have adapted to the current flow. Reversing it is like attempting to make a river run uphill. Nathan, you'll age rapidly as the essence leaves your system. Tsara, you'll experience a surge that could overload your already stressed biology. If either of you panics, if either of you fights the process instead of accepting it, the cascade will turn lethal. We understand, Nathan said. There is one more thing. Chen hesitated. The reversal will break your bond. Completely. You'll no longer be connected, no longer able to sense each other's emotional states. You'll be separate again. Nathan looked at Tsara, found her already looking at him. A strange expression crossed her alien features, something that might have been regret. Perhaps that is for the best, she said quietly. Some connections are too dangerous to maintain. He wasn't sure if she meant dangerous to them or dangerous to those around them, but he nodded agreement. Then, let's do this. Chen activated the equipment. Nathan felt a lurch deep in his chest, like gravity reversing. Heat spread through his body, but not the pleasant warmth of the original integration. This was fire, consuming, rewriting, undoing months of change in seconds. His vision blurred. He gripped Tsara's hand harder, felt her squeezing back with desperate strength. Through the haze of pain, he could see her body convulsing, geometric patterns flaring bright, then dark, then bright again, a strobe of agony. Stay with it, Chen's voice, distant and echoing. Both of you stay conscious, stay willing. Don't fight the reversal. Nathan's skin was crawling, literally crawling, cells shifting and dying and regenerating. He could feel himself aging, years returning, the weight of decades settling back onto bones that had briefly forgotten how to hurt. His joints ached. His vision dimmed. His hair was falling out in clumps. Beside him, Tsara screamed, a sound like crystal shattering, her body arching off the bed. Alarms shrieked. Chen shouted orders to her team. Through the observation window, Nathan saw Volker leaning forward, his expression hungry, watching them die with the attention of a scientist observing an experiment. And something in Nathan snapped. Not rage, not fear, but a cold, clear understanding that Volker wanted this to fail. Wanted proof that the only path was the parasitic one, that Valon had to die for humans to live, that there was no middle ground, no mutual survival. He would not give the bastard that satisfaction. Nathan held Tsara's hand and poured every ounce of will he possessed into acceptance. Not fighting the pain, not resisting the reversal, but welcoming it, choosing it. This was his choice, their choice, a mutual decision to either die together or survive on terms they set themselves. And felt her respond. Felt Tsara's will join his, their fading bond carrying one last message between them. Together. Yes, together. The pain peaked, became transcendent, lifted him out of his body. He was floating, watching from above as the old man on the bed aged another 10 years in 10 seconds, as the alien beside him blazed like a dying star. He saw Chen working frantically, saw monitors flatline and restart, saw the moment when it could have gone either way. Saw Tsara's faceted pattern stabilize, brightening from rust to amber to brilliant gold. Saw his own heart, old and tired and ready to stop, decide to beat one more time. And then he was crashing back into his body, gasping, every nerve on fire but alive, still alive, impossibly alive. The alarms stopped. The machines settled into steady rhythms. Chen was laughing and crying simultaneously, checking readings, running diagnostics, her hands shaking. It worked, she whispered. Oh my God, it actually worked. Nathan turned his head, the simple motion taking tremendous effort, and looked at Tsara. She was breathing hard, her chest rising and falling, but her geometric patterns pulsed with renewed vitality. Her eyes opened, found his, and something passed between them even without the bond. "We live," she said, wonder in her voice. "We live," he confirmed. Through the observation window, Director Volker's face was a mask of fury. He spun and stalked away, and Nathan knew with absolute certainty that this was not over. Volker would not accept this proof of an alternative path, would not surrender the power and control the parasitic program gave him. But that was a problem for later. Right now, Nathan was content to lie on the medical bed, his body aching with returned age, and know that he'd chosen to save someone instead of watching them die. That had to count for something. The recovery took 3 days. Nathan's body stabilized at what Chen estimated was biological 74, older than he'd been before the integration but not catastrophically so. His joints hurt. His vision required reading glasses again. His hair was thin and white, but he was alive and, more importantly, functional. Sarah's recovery was more dramatic. The returned essence had not just stabilized her degradation, but partially reversed it. Her faceted patterns gleamed, her movements regained their fluid grace. She looked, Chen said with professional amazement, like a Valon who'd aged backward 50 years. On the 3rd day, Nathan was cleared to leave medical observation. He found Sarah in the garden, standing among the crystalline sculptures, looking more solid and real than she had in months. "How do you feel?" he asked. "Strange." She flexed her hands, watching the light refract through her patterns. "I had grown accustomed to dying. Survival feels almost inappropriate." "We'll adjust." He moved to stand beside her. "Chen says we're both stable. No signs of rejection or relapse." "Yes, I heard." A pause. "I also heard that Director Volker has called for our removal from the program. We are no longer welcome test subjects." "Good. I was planning to leave anyway." "And go where?" He'd been thinking about this. "New Mexico, back to my cabin. I have some things to sort through there. Some ghosts to make peace with." He looked at her. "You could come, if you wanted, just until you figure out your next move." "Nathan, I am a war criminal. Your government merely tolerates my presence because I am useful. If I am no longer part of their program, they may revoke my sanctuary status." "Then we'll fight that. Emily knows lawyers, good ones, will find a way." "Why would you do this?" "Because," he said simply, "you matter to me, and I'm tired of losing people who matter." She studied him with those golden eyes. "We are no longer bonded. You owe me nothing." "I'm not offering out of obligation. I'm offering out of choice. There's a difference." Sarah reached out and took his hand, the touch no longer carrying the electric connection of their bond, but still warm, still real. "Then yes, I will come to your desert. We will face whatever comes next together." They left the facility the following week, signing releases and NDAs that Nathan knew were legally unenforceable given the criminal negligence involved. Emily met them at the shuttle station, Margaret in tow, her daughter's face carefully neutral, until she saw him and something in her expression crumbled. "Dad," she breathed, "you look so old." "I am old, Em, just finally looking the right age for it." Emily hugged him, fierce and tight, and whispered against his shoulder, "I'm glad you're alive." "I'm so glad." Little Margaret stared up at Sarah with huge eyes. "You're the pretty alien. Are you living with Grandpa now?" "For a time, small one," Sarah said gently, "if that is acceptable to you." "It's okay. You have pretty sparkles. I like you." And just like that, with the easy acceptance of a child, the strangeness became normal. The cabin in New Mexico felt different with Sarah in it. Too small, somehow, or maybe Nathan had just grown used to sharing space. They established routines. Morning coffee on the porch, watching the sun rise over the desert. Evenings when Sarah sang to the stars and Nathan listened, understanding now the grief and defiance in those alien melodies. Dr. Chen sent updates. The integration program was under investigation. Director Volker suspended pending inquiry. The remaining Valon volunteers had been offered genuine choices, full disclosure, the opportunity to participate in reversal protocols if they wished. 3 had chosen to continue the parasitic integration, believing the risk worth the reward. 2 had opted for reversal. 1 had simply left, walking away from the whole enterprise. Emily visited on weekends, bringing Margaret, slowly building the relationship Nathan had spent years destroying. It was awkward and tentative and precious, every moment of it. And through it all, Nathan and Sarah existed in a strange space between friendship and something more, neither quite willing to name what was growing between them. 2 months after leaving the facility, Nathan woke to find Sarah gone. Panic seized him until he saw the note on the kitchen table, written in her precise alien script that somehow worked with human letters. Gone to Santa Fe. There is someone I must find. I will return by evening. He spent the day anxious, pacing, wondering what had pulled her away. When she returned at sunset, she was not alone. The woman with her was human, early 70s, with scarred hands and eyes that had seen too much. Nathan, Sarah said quietly, this is Dr. Sarah Chen. I believe you know each other. He stared, understanding dawning. You brought her here. I used Valon resources to search for connections to your wife's death. Dr. Chen's name appeared in sealed files. I thought, Sarah paused, that you both deserved to speak, without official channels, without witnesses. Chen stood in the doorway, her posture defensive. I didn't know she was bringing me here. If you want me to leave, I'll go. No, Nathan gestured her inside. Stay, please. They sat in the small living room, 3 people bound by Margaret's death in different ways. Chen spoke first, her voice steady but her eyes wet. I tried to stop the procedure when I saw it failing. Volker overruled me, said we had to see it through, that stopping midway would be worse than completion. Your wife, your sister, died because he was too arrogant to admit he'd made a mistake. And then he buried it. Paid me off, threatened me, made me sign NDAs that would have destroyed my career if I violated them. And you stayed silent. I did. To my eternal shame, I did. Chen looked at Sarah. But then this one found me, showed me the reversal protocol data, told me about survivors, about an alternative path, and I realized I could not stay silent anymore. What are you saying? Nathan asked. I'm saying I have evidence. Documentation of the original trials, Margaret's real cause of death, Volker's negligence and cover-up. Everything needed to bring criminal charges. Chen pulled a data chip from her pocket. But I need someone willing to testify, someone with standing. Margaret's husband, for instance. You want me to destroy Volker? I want you to get justice for my sister, and for all the others who died because he prioritized his career over human lives. Nathan looked at Sarah, who watched him with calm, steady eyes. This was your doing. You found her. I used Valon resources to search for connections to Margaret's death. Dr. Chen's name appeared in sealed files. I convinced her to speak with us. Why? Why would you do this? Because you gave me my life back. The least I can do is help you find justice for the one you lost. Nathan took the data chip, felt its weight, lighter than air but heavier than worlds. If I do this, it becomes public. Everything, Margaret's real death, my participation in the program, all of it. Yes, Chen said, the truth, complete and unredacted. He thought about Margaret, about the woman who'd loved him enough to attempt an experimental procedure just to have more years with him, who died in agony while he gave speeches about human-alien cooperation, Who deserved to be remembered for more than cancer and absence? "Let's burn it down," he said. "All of it." The legal process took months. Depositions and testimony, forensic analysis of medical records, reconstruction of the cover-up. Emily worked with a team of lawyers, building an airtight case. Dr. Chen provided insider testimony, delivered the documentation that made denial impossible. And through it all, Tsara stayed. Not in the cabin, which was too small, but in a house they rented together in Santa Fe, a larger space that could hold both their histories. They were not lovers, not in any conventional sense, but something deeper than that. Survivors, witnesses, two beings who'd faced death together and chosen life on their own terms. The trial of director James Volker became national news. The integration program's hidden history exposed to sunlight. The deaths, the exploitation, the lies. Margaret's name spoken in courtrooms and news broadcasts, her real story finally told. Volker showed no remorse, maintained he'd acted in humanity's best interest, that some deaths were acceptable costs for the chance at evolutionary advancement. The jury deliberated for 40 minutes before convicting on all counts. Criminal negligence resulting in death, falsification of government records, conspiracy to commit fraud. He received 20 years. Not enough, Nathan thought, watching the sentencing, but something. The integration program was permanently shut down. New protocols established, requiring full disclosure, mutual consent, independent oversight. The surviving Valon volunteers were offered reparations, citizenship, the dignity of choice. And on a Tuesday, because important things always seem to happen on Tuesdays, Nathan received a message that changed everything again. It was from the Centauri Colony Administration, a response to the search Tsara had initiated months ago, looking for any record of her wife's ship. They'd found her, Tsara'vel, alive, living in a refugee settlement on the third moon, working as a cultural preservation specialist, maintaining records of the lost Valon homeworld for future generations. Nathan found Tsara in the garden they'd planted together, human and alien flowers growing in harmony. He handed her the tablet with the message, watched her alien features shift through emotions he couldn't name. "She lives," Tsara whispered. "After all this time, she lives." "There's more." Nathan scrolled down to the final paragraph. "She's been searching for you. Has your name on every refugee registry database in human space. She never stopped looking." 14 years, Tsara said. "We have been looking for each other for 14 years. The Centauri administration is willing to arrange contact. Video call first, then if you want, transportation to the colonies." Tsara set the tablet down with shaking hands. "I do not know if I can face her. I am not the same being she knew. I have killed, sacrificed, changed in ways she may not recognize." Nathan sat beside her. "Then you tell her that. You tell her everything. And you let her decide if the being you've become is someone she can still love. And if she cannot, then at least you'll know. And you can grieve what was and move forward with what is." Tsara looked at him, golden eyes bright with crystalline tears. "You would be alone again, if I leave." "I'd be alone but not empty. There's a difference." He took her hand. "You gave me back my life, Tsara. Let me give you back yours. Go to her. Find out if 14 years and a universe of changes can be bridged." "Come with me," she said suddenly. "To Centauri. You and Emily and Margaret. See the colonies, meet Kira, help me navigate this reunion that terrifies me more than any battle I have ever fought. I'm 74 years old and look it. Space travel is for younger people. You are 74 years old and spent months bonded to alien biotechnology. You are more qualified for space travel than most humans half your age." She squeezed his hand. "Please, I do not wish to face this alone." He thought about it. about the desert cabin and its ghosts, about Emily building her life in Denver, about Margaret growing up with stories of a grandfather who'd done something brave, about Sarah facing the love she'd thought lost and how terrifying that would be. "Okay," he said. "We'll come, all of us. Family trip to the colonies, why not?" Her smile was radiant, inhuman and beautiful. The journey to Centauri took 6 weeks in cryosleep, their bodies frozen while the ship traversed distances that defied comprehension. Nathan woke feeling ancient and young simultaneously, every joint aching but his mind sharp with anticipation. The refugee settlement on Centauri 3 was a patchwork of human and Veilon architecture, two species learning to build together in the shadow of cosmic displacement. Sarah stood at the viewport as they descended, her whole body vibrating with tension. 14 years, she kept saying. What if she has moved on? What if I am a ghost she has already mourned and released? Then you find out and you deal with it, Emily said practically. She'd taken to Tsara with surprising ease, the two of them bonding over shared experience of loving complicated men. But you don't turn around without attempting. The landing pad was crowded with Veilon refugees, all of them there to witness the reunion that had become something of a legend in the settlement. The human who'd loved a Veilon war criminal enough to help her survive. The Veilon commander who'd searched for 14 years for the wife she'd lost in the evacuation. And there, standing at the front of the crowd, was Tsara'vel. She was smaller than Sarah, her bioluminescent patterns running silver and blue instead of amber and gold. Her face was scarred, her body showing signs of hard years, but when her eyes found Sarah, something in her expression shattered and rebuilt simultaneously. They moved toward each other through the crowd, slowly at first, then faster, until they collided in an embrace that transcended species. That was pure and simple and heartbreakingly human in its intensity. Nathan turned away, giving them privacy, and found Emily standing beside him with Margaret in her arms. "That's what love looks like," his daughter said quietly. "After everything, after years and death and change, still choosing each other." "Yes," Nathan said. "Yes, it is." The years passed the way autumn leaves fell, slowly at first, then all at once. Nathan turned 75 in the desert cabin with Emily and little Margaret and a cake that had too many candles to fit properly. The child blew them out for him, her cheeks puffed with effort, and he felt the weight of time pressing down like a physical thing. Not unwelcome, just present, undeniable. His second grandchild arrived on a spring morning, a boy Emily named Thomas after Margaret's father. Nathan held the infant with shaking hands, marveling at the fragility of new life, the audacity of it. This tiny being knew nothing of integration programs or alien wars or the cosmic indifference of dying suns. He was pure potential, unmarred by history, and Nathan envied him that innocence even as he was grateful to witness it. "You're crying, Dad," Emily said gently, adjusting the blankets around Thomas. "Old men cry," he told her. "It's in the contract." She laughed, and the sound was Margaret's laugh, his wife's joy echoing across the barrier of death, and he cried harder. The foundation Emily had built for integration survivors grew beyond anything they'd imagined. Dozens of human participants came forward with their own stories of exploitation and cover-ups. The legal settlements bankrupted 3 government contractors and sent 4 more bureaucrats to prison alongside Volker. It wasn't revenge, exactly, but it was accountability, and that mattered. Nathan testified at hearings, gave interviews, became the public face of integration reform. It exhausted him, the constant travel, the reliving of trauma, but he persevered because people needed to hear the truth from someone who'd lived it. Because Margaret's memory deserved more than silence. Dr. Sarah Chen was awarded the Humanitarian Science Prize for her reversal protocol work. She used the money to establish a research institute focused on ethical xenobiology, integration methods that didn't require sacrifice from either species. The first successful human Velon hybrid was born there, a child of willing parents who'd chosen genetic merger instead of parasitic bonding. The baby had her mother's eyes, and her Velon father's geometric patterns running just beneath the skin, beautiful and strange and proof that evolution could be chosen rather than forced. Sarah sent messages from Centauri 3, long letters full of philosophical observations and updates on her life with Kira. They'd adopted 3 orphaned Velon children, refugees who'd lost families in the evacuation. The letters included photos of a family that transcended biology, love that required no blood ties to be real. Nathan kept them in a box beside Margaret's old journals, past and present existing side by side. On a Tuesday in October, 5 years after the reversal procedure, Nathan woke to find his left arm completely numb. He attempted to move it and couldn't, attempted to call for help and found his words slurring, incomprehensible. The stroke was minor, the doctors said later. Could have been much worse. But it was a warning, clear and undeniable. The clock was counting down. Emily wanted him to move to Denver, to live with her family where someone could monitor him constantly. He refused, gently but firmly. The desert was where he needed to be, where he could think, where Margaret's ghost walked beside him in the evening cool and Sarah's songs still echoed in his memory. But he agreed to a compromise. A medical alert system, weekly check-ins, and a promise that if things got worse, he'd accept help. It was enough to ease Emily's mind, barely. The rehabilitation was frustrating, humiliating. Learning to use his left hand again, to form words without his tongue betraying him. Physical therapy with a young woman named Jessica, who was unfailingly patient with his cursing and complaints. Slowly, painfully, he regained most of the function. Not all, never all again, but enough. During those months of recovery, Nathan started writing again. Not a book this time, but letters. To Margaret, telling her about the grandchildren she'd never met, about the changes in the world since her death, about how sorry he still was. To Tsara, thanking her for the gift of continued life, for showing him that redemption was possible even for the guilty. To Emily, saying all the things he'd never been good at saying face to face. To the grandchildren, for them to read when he was gone, explaining who he'd been and what he'd learned and why love mattered more than achievement. He sealed them in envelopes marked for delivery upon his death, gave them to Emily with instructions. She held the stack and looked at him with eyes too bright. "You planning on dying soon, Dad?" "Planning on being ready when it happens. There's a difference." She kissed his forehead, her touch gentle. "Don't be in a hurry." "Never again," he promised. 6 months after the stroke, Nathan received a message that shattered his carefully constructed peace. The UN Xenobiology Council was investigating new integration trials, this time on volunteers from the outer colonies where oversight was minimal. The parasitic model, stripped of its worst abuses but still fundamentally extractive. Velon dying slowly so humans could live longer. They'd learned nothing. Or worse, they'd learned exactly the wrong lessons. Nathan attempted to ignore it, attempted to tell himself he'd done his part, earned his rest. But the knowledge gnawed at him like a physical wound. People were being used. Aliens were dying. And he was sitting in his desert cabin pretending it wasn't his problem anymore. He called Dr. Chen, found her already aware and equally furious. "I thought we'd ended this," she said. "I thought the tribunals and the reforms meant something." They did for a while, but there's too much money in longevity, too much fear of death. People want what the Velon have, and they don't care what it costs. So what do we do? What we did before, Nathan said, feeling tired and old and absolutely certain. We expose it. We fight it. We make it too expensive to continue. Nathan, you're 76 years old. You've had a stroke. You can't take on another crusade. Watch me. He spent the next 3 months gathering evidence, conducting interviews with colony volunteers who'd been promised miracles and given parasitic bonds instead. The work drained him, left him exhausted and aching, but also alive in a way he hadn't felt since the reversal. This was what he was meant to do: bear witness, speak truth, stand between the vulnerable and those who would use them. Emily found out and was predictably angry. "You're killing yourself," she shouted during a video call. "For what? To save people you don't even know. To save people who deserve better than being treated as resources." "Yes." He kept his voice calm, gentle. "I know you're scared of losing me, Em, but I'd rather die doing something that matters than live another decade as a spectator." Mom would have hated this. She would have wanted you here, with family, not chasing crusades. "Your mother volunteered for an integration trial because she wanted more time with me," he said quietly. "Because she was brave and hopeful and willing to risk everything for love. You think she'd want me to turn away from people facing the same choice she did? You think she'd want her death to mean nothing?" Emily was silent for a long time. When she spoke, her voice was thick with tears. "Just don't die, Dad, please. Whatever you do, just don't die yet." "I'm attempting, sweetheart. I promise I'm attempting." The second exposé, when it published, hit harder than the first. Nathan's name carried weight now. The story of the old man who'd survived integration and dedicated his remaining years to fighting its abuses resonated across Earth and the colonies. Public pressure mounted. Investigations launched. The outer colony programs were suspended pending review. But the cost was steep. Nathan's health declined sharply under the stress. More small strokes, each one stealing a little more function. His left leg weakened. His vision in one eye dimmed. The doctors spoke in careful euphemisms about quality of life and palliative care and making himself comfortable. He was dying, not immediately, but soon enough. Another year, maybe 2 if he was careful, less if he kept pushing himself the way he had been. On a clear winter night, sitting on his porch under stars that cared nothing for human mortality, Nathan made a decision. He called Sarah on Centauri 3, the lag making conversation awkward but the connection still real. "I need your help," he said when her face appeared on the screen, older now but still luminous, still beautiful in her alien way. "One more time." She listened as he explained about the colony programs, the continuing exploitation, the need for someone to testify who could speak for Valon victims with authority. Someone who'd survived the worst of integration and come out the other side. "I am no longer on Earth," she said gently. "I have built a life here, a family." "I know, and I wouldn't ask if there was another way." But Nathan leaned forward, willing her to understand. They need to hear from a Valon who chose reversal, who can explain what it costs to be bonded against your will. "You're the only one who can do this, Tsara. The only one with the credibility and the experience. You are asking me to abandon Kira and the children for months of travel and testimony. To relive trauma I have worked hard to move past. I'm asking you to help me finish what we started, to make sure no one else has to go through what you did, what we both did." Tsara was quiet, her golden eyes unreadable across the light years. Then Kira's voice came from off-screen, saying something in Valon language. Tsara turned, spoke rapidly in response, a conversation Nathan couldn't follow. When she looked back at the camera, something in her face had shifted. "Kira says I should go. She says that some debts must be repaid even when they are inconvenient." She turned slightly, and Kira came into frame, silver and blue patterns gleaming. "We will both come. Our children are old enough to be left with trusted friends, and this fight is too important for half measures." Nathan felt his throat tighten. "You don't have to do this." Yes, Kira said, her accent thicker than Sarah's but her English clear. We do. Because you gave us back to each other. Because some things matter more than comfort. We will come, Nathan Hale. We will testify. We will help you end this. The journey from Centauri took 6 weeks. Nathan spent that time preparing his testimony, organizing evidence, attempting to maintain his health despite the steady decline. Another small stroke left his speech slightly slurred permanently. He compensated by writing out his points, practicing until muscle memory could compensate for neural damage. Emily came to stay with him, bringing the children, filling the cabin with noise and life and the sweet chaos of family. Little Margaret, now 7, read him stories in the evenings. Thomas, at 2, climbed on everything and asked endless questions about the desert creatures scuttling outside. It was exhausting and perfect, exactly what he needed. When Sarah and Kira's ship landed in Albuquerque, Nathan was there to meet them despite Emily's protests. The 2 Valon women descended the ramp like visiting royalty, tall and strain, and utterly unbowed by years or distance. Sarah saw him and stopped, her faceted patterns pulsing with what he'd learned to read as distress. Nathan, you look, she paused, searching for diplomatic words. Old and dying, he finished for her. I know. It's okay. This is what 76 looks like when you're not borrowing vitality from alien biotechnology. She crossed the landing pad in 3 long strides and embraced him, carefully, aware of his fragility. I am sorry. I should have come sooner. You're here now. That's what matters. Kira joined them, her greeting more formal but no less warm. You have lost weight, Nathan Hale. Your daughter is not feeding you adequately. My daughter is feeding me fine. I'm just burning calories staying angry. He smiled at them both. Thank you for coming, both of you. The hearings began 2 weeks later in Geneva, the same halls where Nathan had once given speeches about peaceful integration. The irony wasn't lost on him. Sarah and Kira testified with devastating clarity, describing the parasitic bonding process, the physical toll, the psychological weight of dying to sustain another species. Their words, delivered in those alien harmonics that made everything sound more grave and beautiful, shook the assembled delegates in ways human testimony never could. Nathan testified on the final day, his slurred speech forcing him to read slowly from prepared remarks. He spoke about Margaret's death, about the lies that had killed her and others, about the moral bankruptcy of a system that treated sentient beings as resources to be harvested, about the possibility of genuine cooperation, mutual benefit, evolution chosen rather than forced. The integration we practiced was parasitism dressed in scientific language, he said, his words echoing in the vast chamber. Real integration requires equality, choice, and respect. Anything less is just exploitation with better marketing. The vote, when it came, was overwhelming. The outer colony programs were permanently shut down. New protocols established, requiring full disclosure, independent medical oversight, and the immediate availability of reversal procedures for any participant who chose them. It wasn't perfect, but it was progress. Real, measurable progress. That night, they celebrated in Nathan's hotel room, Emily and the children joining Sarah and Kira in a cramped space filled with laughter and the sweet fizz of champagne someone had sent as congratulations. Little Margaret asked Sarah to sing, and the Valon woman obliged, her voice filling the room with that haunting melody Nathan had first heard on a balcony years ago. When the song ended, Thomas, fearless and 2, toddled over to Kira and demanded to be picked up. The alien woman looked startled, then charmed, lifting the child with careful reverence. He's so small, she murmured. How do humans keep such fragile creatures alive? Constant vigilance and luck, Emily said dryly. You get used to it. Our children were never this breakable, Sarah said, watching Thomas grab at Kira's geometric patterns. Valon young emerged nearly fully formed. This helplessness is uniquely mammalian. And uniquely terrifying, Nathan added. I lived in fear for Emily's first 5 years. Every fever felt like the end of the world. Yet I survived despite your worrying, Emily said, settling beside him on the couch. We're remarkably resilient, we humans. So I have learned, Sarah said softly, her eyes on Nathan. So I have learned. The celebration wound down as the children grew tired. Emily tucked them into the adjoining room while Nathan sat with Tsara and Kira on the balcony, Geneva spread below them in a carpet of lights. How long? Sarah asked quietly. How long do the doctors give you? 6 months to a year. Maybe longer if I stop stressing my system. He shrugged. I've made peace with it. Have you? Kira studied him with those silver blue eyes. You seem to be fighting very hard for someone at peace. I'm at peace with dying, not with wasting the time I have left. There's a difference. Sarah reached out and took his hand, her crystalline skin cool against his wrinkled flesh. We could attempt another reversal. Kira and I, we could bond with you, sustain you for more years. No, Nathan said firmly. No more parasitism. I'm grateful for the offer, but I'm ready to age naturally, to die when my time comes. Besides, he squeezed her hand gently, there's something else we need to discuss. The bond we share, what remains of it, we need to sever it completely. Sarah's patterns dimmed slightly. I thought the reversal broke our connection. It broke most of it, but Chen says there's still a residual link, a faint echo. If I die with that link intact, it could damage you. Psychic shock, she called it, like losing a limb you didn't know you still had. Then we sever it, Sarah said simply. When? Soon, before I deteriorate further. He looked at both of them. I want you to have your life on Centauri without any shadow from my death. Clean break, complete separation. You are certain? Kira asked. I'm certain. He managed a smile. You two have children who need you, a community, a future. I won't let my ending compromise that. They sat in comfortable silence, 3 beings from different worlds who'd found common ground in shared struggle. Below them, the city hummed with human activity, millions of lives intersecting and diverging, the vast dance of civilization continuing regardless of individual mortality. I will miss you, Sarah said eventually, when you are gone. I'll miss you too, but you'll carry the memory. That's what survivors do. They carry the dead forward. She made a sound that might have been a laugh or a sob. You have taught me much, Nathan Hale, about sacrifice and choice and the difference between surviving and living. You taught me those things first. I was just a better student than I'd been in earlier lessons. The severance procedure took place 3 days later in Dr. Chen's lab, brought out of retirement for one final intervention. It was simpler than the reversal, just a controlled disruption of the remaining neural pathways that still connected Nathan and Sarah across whatever quantum frequencies the essence operated on. Chen activated the equipment. Nathan felt a brief, sharp pain behind his eyes, then nothing. Just emptiness where Tsara's presence had been, a silence that was both relief and loss. It's done, Chen said. You're completely separate now. Sarah swayed slightly, Kira catching her elbow. I feel it. The absence, like a room going dark. Good, Nathan said. Now when I die, you'll grieve like a friend, not like you're losing part of yourself. That's how it should be. They returned to Centauri the following week, promises to stay in touch, to visit if they could, to not let distance become silence. Nathan watched their ship rise into the sky and felt the weight of loss, familiar and bearable. Everyone left eventually. The trick was being grateful they'd come at all. The months that followed were a slow, gentle decline. Nathan's body failed in increments, each small stroke stealing a little more. His left side went mostly numb. His speech deteriorated further. Walking became difficult, then impossible without assistance. Emily moved him to Denver against his protests, set him up in a room in her house where he could hear the children playing and still have his privacy. The grandchildren were unfailingly patient with his limitations. Margaret read to him for hours, her 7-year-old voice stumbling over difficult words but persisting with stubborn determination. Thomas brought him toys and rocks, and whatever treasures a 2-year-old deemed valuable, presenting them with the solemnity of state gifts. They made him laugh, made him forget the indignity of needing help with basic functions, made the days bearable. Emily was there for everything, managing his care with the fierce competence she'd inherited from her mother. She bathed him when he could no longer manage it himself, fed him when his hands shook too badly to hold utensils, sat with him through long nights when pain made sleep impossible. He attempted to thank her, attempted to apologize for the burden, but she wouldn't hear it. "This is what family does," she said simply. "We show up, we help, we stay." "Your mother would be proud of you," he told her. "She'd be proud of both of us, finally." On a Tuesday in late summer, Nathan woke feeling strange. Not sick exactly, but displaced. Like his consciousness was slightly misaligned with his body. Emily called the doctor, who came and ran tests and spoke in gentle tones about the end approaching, about making him comfortable, about saying goodbyes. But Nathan rallied, the way dying people sometimes did, gathering strength for one last push. He asked Emily to set up video calls, wanting to say proper farewells to the people who mattered. Dr. Chen answered from her institute, her face lined with age but her eyes still sharp. "You're dying," she said without preamble. "Hello to you too, Sarah." "Don't deflect, I can see it in your face. Days, maybe a week." "Probably," he admitted. "I wanted to thank you. For everything. For the reversal protocol, for standing up to Volker, for showing me there was another way. For being my sister-in-law, even if we never got to know each other properly while Margaret was alive." "You did that yourself. I just provided the science." "Science is never just science. It's always about how we choose to use it. You chose well." "So did you, eventually." She smiled, sad and genuine. "Margaret would have been proud, Nathan, of the man you became after her death. My sister loved you despite everything. I'm glad you finally lived up to that love." "I hope so. God, I hope so." Sarah and Kira called from Centauri, their 3 adopted children crowding into frame, curious about the dying human their parents spoke of with such affection. The children were young by Valon standards, but already taller than Nathan had ever been, their geometric patterns just beginning to develop distinct colors. Uncle Nathan, the oldest one, said, using the honorific Sarah had taught them, "Mother says you are completing your life cycle." "That's a very diplomatic way of saying I'm dying. Yes." "Will you return to your planet's soil? Become part of the ecosystem?" "Eventually. First I'll be cremated, then scattered. But yes, back to the earth." "That is good. You should nourish the world that made you." The simple acceptance of it, the lack of sentimentality, was oddly comforting. Valon understood death as transition, not tragedy. He envied them that clarity. "Take care of your mothers," he told the children. "They've been through more than you know. They deserve peace." "We will," they promised solemnly. Sarah waited until the children left, then leaned close to the camera. "I wish I could be there, to sit with you at the end. You're needed where you are, I understand. And Sarah," he paused, "because of the severance, you won't feel it when I go. You'll just wake up one day and get a message. I wanted you to know that's intentional. That's a gift. You don't need to carry my death the way you've carried so many others." Her crystalline tears fell, silent and beautiful. "Live well in what remains, Nathan Hale. And when you go, go knowing you made a difference." "I'll strive for that," he said, deliberately choosing the word. "That's all I ever could do. just strive. The call ended, and Nathan felt exhausted, wrung out, but also lighter somehow. The goodbyes were said. The peace was made. What remained was just the waiting. But before the waiting, there was one more thing he needed to do. "Emily," he called, his voice barely above a whisper. "Get me to the desk. I need to write." "Dad, you can barely hold a pen." "Then I'll dictate and you'll write, please." She helped him to the desk in his room, settled him in the chair with pillows to keep him upright. He closed his eyes, gathering his thoughts, and began to speak. Emily's pen scratched across paper, capturing his words. It was a letter, to everyone and no one, to the future, a final testament. "To those who read this," he began, "I am Nathan Hale, and by the time you find these words, I will be gone. Not disappeared. Not missing. Simply finished with my time. I want to tell you what I learned in the hope that it might save you some suffering." He spoke for an hour, Emily writing steadily, occasionally asking him to slow down or repeat something. He talked about Margaret and the cost of absence, about Sarah and the possibility of redemption, about the integration program and what it taught him about the difference between using and loving, between taking and sharing. "The universe is vast and cold and mostly empty," he said. "But in the tiny spaces where life manages to cling on, where consciousness emerges against all odds, we owe each other something. Not perfection, not even constant presence, just honest effort, just the willingness to see each other truly and say, yes, you matter. Your pain matters. Your joy matters. I will bear witness to your existence." Emily's hand was shaking, tears dropping onto the paper, but she kept writing. "I failed at this more than I succeeded," Nathan continued. "I let work become more important than love. I chose achievement over presence. I convinced myself that changing the world mattered more than showing up for the small, sacred spaces where I was needed. And people died because of those choices. People I loved. People who deserved better from me." He paused, breathing hard, the effort of speaking exhausting him. "But I also learned that it's never too late to change. That even old men can become better than they were. That redemption is possible not through grand gestures, but through daily choices to show up, to stay, to care even when it's inconvenient or frightening or costs you something. I learned that love between species is possible, that aliens can be more human than human sometimes. That consciousness, wherever it arises, deserves dignity and choice. I learned that my daughter was stronger than I ever gave her credit for, that my grandchildren carried forward the best parts of people they never met. That family is built through presence, not blood. And I learned, finally, at the very end, that how you die matters less than how you live. That you can't control the end, but you can control the striving. And that striving, honest, unreserved striving, is enough. His voice failed completely. Emily set down the pen and came to him, wrapped her arms around him carefully, and they sat together crying for everything lost and everything found. The last week passed in a blur of medication and half-sleep. The pain was managed, kept at bay by drugs that also made thinking difficult. Nathan drifted in and out, seeing people who weren't there. Margaret, young and laughing. Sarah, singing. The children, all of them every age at once. On the final night, Emily sat beside his bed reading aloud from his book, the one he'd written about integration. Her voice was steady, professional, the voice she used in court, armor against feeling too much. He reached out with his good hand, found hers, squeezed weakly. "Don't," he whispered. "Don't hide, not now." She broke then, set the book aside and put her head on his chest, shoulders shaking with sobs she'd been holding back for days. "I'm not ready," she said. "I know you have to go, but I'm not ready." "No one ever is. That's okay." "I forgave you," she said. "I want you to know that. For missing Mom's death, for all the absences, all of it, I forgave you." "I know. I felt it, thank you. Be at peace, Dad. You earned it. I'll endeavor, he said, the words slurring. Always just endeavor. Little Margaret crept into the room, 7 years old and already understanding that something momentous was happening. She climbed onto the bed, careful not to jostle him, and curled against his side. Are you going to see Grandma Margaret now? She asked. Maybe, I don't know how it works. But if I do, I'll tell her about you, about how smart and brave you are. Tell her I have her eyes. Everyone says so. I will. He stroked her hair with his trembling hand. Take care of your mom, and your brother, they need you. I will, the child promised with the absolute certainty of the young. Thomas was asleep in his crib down the hall, too young to understand, too innocent to carry the weight of this moment. Nathan was grateful for that. The boy would have no memory of this night, would know his grandfather only through stories. Maybe that was better. Let him remember the idea instead of the dying flesh. The night deepened. Emily and Margaret fell asleep in the chair beside the bed, exhausted by grief and vigil. Nathan lay awake, breathing shallow and labored, feeling his body shutting down system by system. Not fighting it, just observing, bearing witness to his own end. He thought about Margaret, his wife, wondered if there was anything after or if death was just cessation, consciousness winking out like a candle in the wind. He hoped for something. Not heaven, necessarily, but continuation. The chance to say sorry one more time, to hear her laugh, to be forgiven not just by Emily but by the woman whose death had shaped everything that came after. He thought about Sarah and Kira on Centauri 3, probably asleep in their bed, wrapped around each other the way Valon couples did. The severance had worked. Sarah wouldn't feel his passing, wouldn't wake with phantom pain or psychic shock. She'd just get a message tomorrow, would grieve as a friend grieves, clean and complete. He'd given her that gift, at least. He thought about Dr. Chen and her institute, continuing the work of ethical integration. About the hybrid children being born, proof that different species could create something new together. About the reforms and the trials and the small victories accumulated over years of fighting. He thought about Emily and Margaret and Thomas, the legacy that mattered more than any book or testimony. 3 people who would carry his memory forward, who would tell his story, who would remember that he endeavored, at the end, to be better than he'd been. And he thought about himself, 67 years of mistakes and 9 years of attempted redemption. It wasn't enough, could never be enough to balance the scales, but it was something. And something he'd learned was better than nothing. The dawn came slowly, light creeping across the Denver skyline, painting the mountains in shades of gold. Nathan watched it through the window, feeling his heartbeat slowing, irregular, preparing to stop. Beautiful, he whispered, still beautiful. Emily stirred, realized what was happening, gripped his hand. Dad, oh God, Dad. It's okay, he managed. Everything's okay. Little Margaret woke, saw the fear in her mother's face, understood without being told. Goodbye, Grandpa, she said, her voice small and brave. Goodbye, sweet girl. Be happy, just be happy. His vision was dimming, the room fading to gray. But he could still hear them, Emily's whispered prayers and Margaret's quiet crying. Could still feel their hands holding his. Could still sense the love in the room, thick and real and undeniable. Not alone, he thought. Not this time, not ever again. His last thought was of Margaret, his wife, standing in their old kitchen bathed in sunlight, smiling at him with forgiveness and love and welcome. Then Nathan Hale, scientist and father and imperfect man who'd endeavored at the end to be better, went still. His heart stopped. His breathing ceased. The consciousness that had been Nathan dissolved into whatever comes after, leaving behind only a body and memories and the people who'd loved him despite his failures. Emily held him and wept, and her daughter held her, and outside the window the sun continued rising indifferent and eternal. The funeral was simple, the way Nathan had requested. Cremation, no service, ashes scattered in the New Mexico desert where he'd found what peace he could. Emily and the children made the drive, Tsara and Kira joining via video link, their images projected onto a tablet propped against a rock. Emily read from the letter Nathan had dictated, his final words carried on the desert wind. When she finished, she opened the urn and let the ashes pour out, gray dust catching the breeze, dispersing across the landscape he'd loved. Margaret tossed a handful of wildflowers after them, their petals bright against the sand. Thomas, not quite understanding but mimicking his sister, threw a handful of dirt. "Goodbye, Grandpa," Margaret said to the wind. "Thank you for endeavoring." On the tablet screen, Tsara began to sing, that haunting melody she'd shared with Nathan on countless starlit nights. Kira joined her, their voices harmonizing in alien frequencies, a funeral dirge for a human who'd shown them that redemption was possible, that love could bridge the gap between stars. The song ended. The wind carried the last of the ashes away, and Nathan Hale returned to the earth that made him, his atoms scattering to feed new life, the cycle continuing as it always had, as it always would. 10 years later, Margaret, now 17, stood in that same desert preparing to leave for college. She'd been accepted to the Chen Institute for Xenobiology, would study integration protocols and ethical cooperation between species. Her life's work chosen in honor of a grandfather she'd barely known, but whose legacy had shaped her world. Emily stood beside her daughter, older now but still strong, still carrying forward. She ran the Integration Survivors Foundation, had expanded it into a global organization providing support and advocacy for humans and aliens alike. The work was hard but meaningful, exactly what her mother would have wanted. Thomas, at 12, was already showing aptitude for medicine, talked about becoming a doctor who specialized in hybrid physiology. The first generation born into a world where human and Veilon children played together, learned together, grew up knowing difference as normal rather than threatening. On Centauri 3, Tsara and Kira had grown old together, their adopted children now adults with children of their own. The family gathered annually on the anniversary of Nathan's death to sing the morning song and remember the human who'd helped their mothers survive. Dr. Sarah Chen had passed 2 years prior, her institute thriving under new leadership, her protocols now standard practice across human and Veilon space. The parasitic integration model was taught in schools as a cautionary tale, a reminder of what happened when science forgot ethics. And in archives across Earth and the colonies, Nathan's book was read by students and scholars, his testimony watched by those learning about the integration wars and the hard-won peace that followed. His story, imperfect and honest, a reminder that change was possible, that even old men could learn, that endeavoring mattered even when success wasn't guaranteed. Emily looked out at the desert, at the mountains beyond, at the sky where stars waited for night to make them visible. She thought about her father and her mother, about all they'd lost and all they'd found, about how their mistakes and triumphs had shaped her children, rippled forward in ways they couldn't have imagined. "He endeavored," she said to Margaret. "At the end, he really endeavored." "I know," her daughter said. "That's why it mattered." They stood together as the sun set, painting the desert in shades of red and gold. Somewhere on Centauri 3, Tsara paused in her evening routine, felt a familiar melancholy without knowing why, and sang a few bars of the old morning song before returning to her family. The desert wind carried their voices across impossible distances, and somewhere in the vast, indifferent universe, consciousness continued its improbable dance, creating meaning where none inherently existed, choosing connection over isolation, love over fear. Because that's what life did. It endeavored. Against all odds, against cosmic inevitability, against the heat death waiting at the end of everything. It endeavored. And sometimes, in the endeavoring, it was enough.